Thank you. I'd like to call this standing committee meeting to order for September 8th. Council, any changes to the agenda? And not seeing any, may I have a motion to accept the agenda? Councillor Wall.
I move to adopt the agenda for standing committee September 8th, 2020.
All those in favor? And we will move on to our minute with council.
Okay, just admitting you now.
And Wendy, should I do a little brief intro right now?
Okay.
Yeah. So, minute with council, this is citizens' opportunity to share any concerns or comments that they have. And these comments and concerns can be good, bad, not so good. We're asking that you be respectful, that you don't ask questions of either admin or council. And please kind of stay within your minute and state your name, please. And go ahead, sir.
I don't know what you're looking at, but good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, town councillors, and town admin. My name is Jan Vaswatten, and I am the current president of the Hinton Disc Golf Association. Being the agenda items for today's standing committee meeting, I wanted to say just a couple of things. In regards to action item number 2, I hope that council supports this action item and that the Disc Golf Club and town can form a true partnership that will help make the disc golf course as awesome as possible and help grow the popularity of this sport in the community. As for action item number 3, I know all of you are well aware of how strongly both the mountain bike club and disc club feel the need to have more parking for the recreation corridor that is created with our 2 parks along with the Beaver Boardwalk. We have passed along many pictures to you of all the cars dangerously parked on Robb Road. The Trans Mountain funding will help make this happen. Both residents and tourists alike will benefit with council approving both of these action items as soon as possible. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to our action items. Our first action item is Civic Partnership Policy and Procedures. And CEO, will you be presenting? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At the August 25th Standing Committee meeting, Council provided direction to bring a civic partnership policy to the September 8th meeting based on the categories presented at the August 25th meeting that included Category 1, intergovernmental agency partnerships, Category 2A, capital infrastructure partnerships, Category 2B, external service and operations partnerships, Category 3, community grant program, and Category 4, donations. The policy presented to Council tonight manages Categories 1 through 2B, as the community grant program, as a policy will not govern the community grant program and does not define Council's ability to provide donations as deemed appropriate by Council. The civic partnership policy aligns with budget timelines and provides for a proposed partnership report annually to support a process where Council can provide direction on which additional partnerships to consider each year. Eligibility for partnerships is determined through that decision-making points that are included in Schedule B, Administration and Agency Partnership Development Process. Please note, administration is recommending that this policy be reviewed after 1 full cycle or 1 full year of implementation so that the process can be adjusted to troubleshoot any issues or concerns that Council may have once it hits the ground. The recommended action for the item tonight is that committee recommend Council approve the Civic Partnership Policy 1107. Ms. Way is present tonight as well to help answer any questions that Council may have.
Thank you, CAO. Council, any discussion, any questions on this action item? And Councillor Waugh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just curious, under this current structure and format, we have a number of groups that have existing funding agreements with the town. If we were to move forward with this structure, CAO Olson, would there be changes to any of the processes or funding agreements that are already in place?
Madam Chair, through to Councillor Waugh. The existing agreements are not intended to be affected by the new policy. It's to provide a process for any new agreements that council may want to consider. Items such as funding amounts, termination clauses, things of that nature should already be within the agreements that are in place. I believe there are a couple of agreements that council may want to consider through this process budget cycle, where money is being provided to civic partnerships, and no agreement is formally in place. Administration will be looking at that through the budget process as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Wall. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. What is the timeline for, if this were to be implemented and a group or organization were to come forward with an idea or initiative or a project, from the time it gets sent to administration to when it would ultimately come to council, how long would that take approximately, if known? And the reason I ask is there's always concerns about projects being lost due to the bureaucratic, and we add another policy, another procedure, and how to work itself through. So any insight would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. I may ask Ms. Way to help clarify that, because she's most familiar with that process. I believe that for 2020, using disc golf as an example, we've been more or less following this process and using this policy to confirm that existing process, but also provides the structure for the next budget cycle, the next calendar year. So we'll see it really come into effect over the next year. But as far as timelines within that year, Ms. Way, if you'd like to provide some clarity.
Thank you, CAO Olson, through the remainder of council. Yeah, so absolutely, the timeline for each of the projects is entirely dependent on the either the project or the partnership itself. Something like, the creation of a parking lot requires engineering, it requires some site visits, different vetting through administration. So that would take significantly longer than perhaps, let's say, if Foon had approached the town and they're just looking for a basic funding agreement. That is a little bit quicker for admin to process and assess. So it will vary. However, I would recommend that any groups who are looking to starting a partnership or having that evaluated next year, that they get those in as soon as possible. As soon as the budget is passed, really, I would be looking to start taking those in February. Thank you.
You're good, Councillor Nelson. And Councillor Nelson.
Nobody's in the queue. How do we handle asks that come within a budget year itself, with potentially shorter timelines where it can't be incorporated into a future budget?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would look to Ms. Way to provide some clarity on that as well.
Thank you. So again, if, for example, Councillor Nelson, just so I understand, perhaps there would be a grant or something that they had access to that would perhaps decrease that timeline. Is that what you're getting at? That they missed the budget year, they wanted in for this year. This process is designed so that any request would be considered in the upcoming budget year. So that you guys have a full picture of everything that you're approving. However, obviously those cases where, we have access to this one grant, in that case, in the pre-meeting that we have with that group, I would hope that they would express that to us at that moment so that admin can take it upon ourselves to bring it to you guys for a request outside of the budget process. However, I will hope that those will be few and far between.
Follow up, sir?
If I can follow up, does the policy allow for administration to quickly bring something of that nature to council? We have contingency funds, we have reserve, I just don't want to risk in the background hearing of an approach to the town of a really good initiative or idea that, maybe costs $1,000 and the return on investment would be huge, but it never comes to council because we now have a policy in place that really restricts the timelines and how things come to council.
So the policy is intended, I suppose, less than the smaller asks, the $1,000 kind of minimal asks, and it's more to look at developing partnerships with groups within the community. So likely stemming from those partnerships would either be larger level projects or partnership agreements that require some continuous funding. Making those decisions outside of a budget cycle would have impacts to the budget the next year. There could be ongoing costs that are incurred or decided upon without seeing the full landscape of council. Administration would use some discretion if it's something that is time sensitive, or as Ms. Way said, that is coming out of cycle, that's I guess time sensitive in use of a grant or something else of that nature. Administration would use some discretion in bringing that forward to council, whether it fits within this policy or not.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. May. Councillor McGowan.
Thank you. In looking at the flow chart, there was one error. First of all, I liked the flow chart. I thought it was an easy way to differentiate the different pathways to get to the different categories. The one area I had a question about was the section on the flow chart, which is, page 10 of 44 on the agenda package. Will the asset reside on town-owned or leased land, and how that splits into either categories 2B and 2A if the answer is no, or if the answer is yes, how the recommendation for category 3 is it's best served through the community grant program. And I guess my concern there was, I think about something like, a larger infrastructure project, like if the bike park, something like the bike park starting from scratch, or let's say, upgrade, or not upgrades, but the spray part, those sorts of things. They're then limited or hampered by the community grant program's sort of max allocation of dollars. And that was my concern. So if it's on town owned or town leased land, then there's the community grant cap that could potentially follow it. And if it's a larger infrastructure project, if we see that there's benefit for the community, we may want to funnel more funds towards that. So I was a little worried that there might be some limitation on the dollars there, unless I'm misreading that or misunderstanding that. That was sort of the concern that jumped to mind.
I'm going to defer to Ms. Way. She's had her hand up. I think there was an issue with the color coding of the arrows that may have caused the confusion. So I'll allow her to explain.
Yes, thank you, CAO Olson, through to the remainder of council. At around 3 o'clock today, 3:15, I sent you guys a new version of schedules A and B with exactly that section referenced. So from the box where it says, will the asset reside on town-owned land, going down to category 3 is actually a no. So they've been flipped. I had done the colors incorrectly. So that should address that for you, Councillor McGowan. Apologies everyone, sorry.
Hey, boom, thank you. That's awesome.
Thank you, Ms. Wade. So seeing no others in queue, I would, yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just following up Councillor Nelson's question, because it's making me think a bit more. Do we want to incorporate a timing, a deadline, or some sort of path to guide these partnerships with a date so they do qualify for the funding for the next budget year? Right now, what's the cutoff? Maybe September-ish, October, as we do deal with our budget. I don't know if that's what Councillor Nelson was alluding to, but that's my only concern. Like, other than that, I like a lot of these. I like the format, and I like what this does, but the timing, I think we'd be remiss to not perhaps add this. So that's my only concern. So I know I'm reiterating the question to some extent, but I don't know if other councillors have issues with that. Thanks.
I have Ms. Wade in queue. Go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Race, through to Mayor Michaels. If you look under section 4.1, specifically 4.13 and 4.14 of the policy, you'll see that administration is required to provide you guys by the 30th of June annually with a partnership agreement inventory. So that will let you know where we're at with anything current for that year, allowing you to provide us any direction well in advance of going into budget if you would like any changes to any current existing partnerships. Further to that, after some direction is received from you, moving on to 4.1.4, before August 1st, we will bring to you all of the proposed partnerships. So that's why I was saying when addressing Councillor Nelson's question that I would hope that all groups would start getting their items into us in February, so that by June 30th and then following that August 1st, we're able to get going with preparing some documentation for you guys to review through the budget process.
Thank you, Ms. Wade. Does that help you?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And did you have your hand up, Councillor McGowan?
Yeah, and actually it's sort of piggybacking off the end of this. So I guess just a clarification for administration, because we know things and requests specifically never happen cleanly, right? There's always sort of that 11th hour request or a request that happens afterwards that for whatever reason might be important and might bear consideration for that year's budget. In looking through this, I didn't see, is there any reason why under extenuating circumstances, council couldn't consider it further to include it after the deadline if we felt that it was important enough? I mean, I didn't see anything that didn't say we couldn't, but I just wanted to clarify with admin, not that we should make that a habit. It's just that, I think we've always had the ability to consider those sorts of things, even though that's not our best practice.
Thank you, sir. CEO.
I suppose, and it seems maybe Ms. Way has an answer to this question as well. I guess what it comes down to is the purpose of the policy and the framework. If the purpose of the policy and the framework is to provide a process for how we're going to be managing these requests as they come forward, and kind of a funnel or a chute to bring them to council in the most productive way possible, where it minimizes impacts midway through a budget year, and that sort of thing, and make sure that council's aware of how it impacts how all agreements are working, or how the annual contributions to all partnerships. If the purpose is to provide some flexibility to that process, we may need to take another look at the reason for the policy, and that's respectfully put forward. Ms. Way, if you had anything further to add.
Thank you. The only thing I would add is under section 4.4.3, there is a note there wherein in the event that we deny any possible partnerships, that those are made clear to council through the information package. So at that point, if perhaps something came in late or we didn't think we could get it all packaged together nicely in preparation for budget, council would see that ahead of time and be able to provide that direction to know this one, we actually do really want you guys to iron it out, keep working on it. But to CAO Olson's point, the process is established to help us be successful in building these partnerships, and being accounting for the underlying dollar figure.
Thank you, Ms. Wade. Thank you, Councillor McGowan. And Councillor McGowan.
I would actually just like to, unless there's any other questions, I'm willing to furnish a direction, and then we can debate or discuss. I'd like to make the motion that committee recommend council approve the civic partnership policy number 1107. And if I could just speak to that briefly, this is one of those things that has been difficult, I think, for councils really for as long as I've been on council. One of the one of the jobs of council is to support organizations and initiatives in the community. And in doing that is finding a fair way to accommodate different organizations that are looking to, really build upon what we have in Hinton. And so I think this is a really good structure. I think it's well thought out. It's innovative. I like the flow chart. I know that sounds a little silly, but it will help those folks on the outside of the organization better understand the process for application and what they might be eligible for. And anytime you have that clarity of communication, that's good. And again, like all of our policies, we can move it forward, I think, and then see how it goes in the next year and make amendments as necessary to build on where we go with this. So I'd just like to express my appreciation to administration for all the hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Hollis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too would speak in favor of this direction. I think, as Councilor Magoon said, this is something in the last 3 years have been a bit of a juggle during budget time, trying to determine what, with civic agencies, what defines that. It's put us sometimes in some difficult positions as well. And I think this, put some clarity both for the communities, organizations, gives them an ability, because I know that some organizations probably are going to potentially go for a partnership, whereas before there was more of an ask, but now a process that they can work through, and I think it's just really going to benefit us in the decision making. And it also, I appreciate the fact that it's with that structure, it does give that deadline and gives us some clarity on that, so that those asks could be for next budget season or budgets, rather than trying to slide it in someplace, because unfortunately then it does impact other agencies that have those admissions in, and maybe other projects as well that could be impacted by the budget as well. So I'm looking forward to using this policy in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Nelson.
I have a very specific question. How do we handle so we have an expectation of these groups and partners to come forward within their time frame for the upcoming budget. How do we handle when council does not pass a budget before the start of a calendar year, especially if that may impact a project that somebody may be doing, knowing that I can't recall the last time a budget was passed before the start of the year of which it's being budgeted for?
Defer to Ms. Way.
Thank you, CAO Olson. So again, I would say that comes down to that group making us aware, this project has to be done by this time. And if we're getting the sense that the budget process is not going to be passed until the next fiscal year, we'll make sure to bring that to your attention so that things can be ironed out as needed. And I feel like there was a second half of that question. Can you repeat it? I seem to have forgotten. Is that it?
That was it. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Councillor Nelson, you're good?
Yep.
And Ms. Fox?
Thank you, Chair, through to Council. So also to comment on the budget process, the civic agency funding sometimes comes into question at the beginning of each calendar year. What typically was happening is that funds to those agencies would not occur for the first 3 months of the year. And once budget was determined, then based on that budget approval, those civic agency groups would then be paid up until they'd be caught up. So as of April, a payment's made for the first 4 months of the year, and then monthly payments start occurring after that. Basically, civic agency funding is, unless a council says we commit to funding you for a 3-year term, it's a yearly basis, and that comes up every year for consideration, so that no funding group is guaranteed funding, just like all our other services. They're there, but if council wants to change them, they do have the forte to bring that up during budget time, and that's kind of why that process is in there. So I could see the same thing occurring, is that if the budget is still waiting approval, payments are not being made until March. I think we ran into trouble this year because COVID and there was some funding issues with some of the groups that came and asked, can we have that funding in advance? But typically we hold off on that.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, and I guess just building on that, I think, is it possible then, if we were in that position, which is, always a likelihood, I suppose, as part of our interim budget that we pass, is it possible that we could deal with that problem if it was identified early that for a particular civic agency that was going to be a critical issue that we were aware of, that we could build in that process of allocating those first 3 months fund if we were anticipating that we were going to continue that support as a council? I'm imagining that's possible if somebody wants to correct me.
I have Ms. Fox would like to respond to that.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, absolutely, council can make that decision. Where I would caution is starting precedents, because take our capital projects, for an example. A lot of those require timely decisions. A lot of our contracts, our quotes, and the work that we need done is very timely. And we tend to not be able to spend on capital projects. So if we start giving different areas or different groups the ability to spend before that, sometimes it looks like we're prioritizing those things over our actual day-to-day business. But it is in council's purview to make those decisions if they so feel necessary.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Councillor Nelson.
I'll speak to kind of the motion as a whole. I actually won't support the motion as it stands. I really struggle with the committee recommend council wording, in that I'm not ready to recommend yet, although when it comes to regular council, I may vote in favor of it. I really worry that there's going to be precedent setting outside of this policy, because there'll be groups that come forward and say, hey, we're doing this, or there's timeline. And I think ultimately the civic agency's conversation is a political conversation. And although by having a policy, it may seem like it's going to be easier to have some of those conversations, I actually think it'll be more difficult, in that once a group has gone through the entire process as it's laid out and it comes before council, it actually becomes harder for council to say no to that group than had it been just an ask. So I'm not ready to recommend council yet, so I'll vote against it, but I'm looking forward to having another week to reach out and make sure this isn't something that's going to end up being just a bureaucratic nightmare that ultimately ends up coming to council in a manner where now it's almost undermining administration's decision. And then lobbying council, which if they just started with the lobbying of council and we made a political decision, which is ours to make, I think it actually might be easier than having this policy in place. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be speaking in favor of this. I still have some reservations about the timeline between when we decide by August 15th and setting up for these organizations or these agencies to know. I know we're telling them it's February, but I wish it was laid out in here. But I am content that we're going to review this within in a year from now to sort of tweak it. So I do like it, and maybe I bring something forward next week, or someone else from council, for what that timeline looks from the agency's perspective. But overall, I think it's really good work, and I look forward to fleshing out the ones we do support and the ones we don't. At the end of the day, there's a part in here that will put council in a position to decide, and if they're tough decisions, because I do agree with Councillor Nelson, and it's going to make it a bit harder, but we have to own those. And now we'll have, I think, some good legwork prior in order to make an informed, good decision that we have to own. So overall, I really like this. I'll support it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So any more, yes, Councillor McGowan.
Just in hearing some of the concerns around, owning the decision versus, sort of it being one of those, it came as a recommendation after going through the process. I guess for myself, the way I see it is that, what we're really trying to focus on with this policy is that civic partnership aspect. And that was really the defining characteristic of what was giving us trouble in the past, was how do we wrap a policy around what defines a civic agency or a civic partnership? And I think that's what this does. For myself, what it doesn't do is it doesn't alienate that council's political ability to make a decision, on an ask that comes to council as a whole from the public. The policy doesn't do that. So we can still have that. A group can come to council and say, look, we know that there is a civic agency policy. We don't think that we actually fit in that. So we want to come and ask you outside of scope for this. We can still deal with that. And again, we can have the political control to make that decision and deal with it in regular chambers while still having a policy that deals with civic partnerships. I absolutely hear the concerns and I agree with them, but I don't think it's one or the other. So, thanks.
Thank you, sir. Okay, any further discussion, any further questions from council? None? And if there is no more discussion, I will call the question. That committee recommends council approve the civic partnership policy number 1107. All those in favor? And opposed? Thank you. That's carried. Our next action item is proposed Parks and Recreation Service Area addition, and we'll be speaking about the disc golf, and CEO will be presenting.
Thank you. At the standing committee meeting on August 25th, administration requested that an additional report be brought forward regarding the relationship between the town of Hinton and the Hinton Disc Golf Association, as the HDGA has been involved in a parking lot proposal to expand parking capacity off of Broad Road, and this is to support disc golf, mountain biking, and trail access in that area. The parking lot item is next up on the agenda and will provide clarity around the town's relationship with the Hinton Disc Golf Association, and this decision-making process will influence additional decisions based on the potential of that project. A clumsy way of saying that. The relationship between the town and the Disc Golf Association hasn't been formalized to date through an agreement or understanding, though the town's worked with the group to secure a recreation lease for the course area and provide other administrative supports as well. The formalizing the acknowledgement of disc golf as part of the town's recreation service area, the town can support the asset further as certainty is established in moving forward for things such as the recreation lease renewal and other administrative support. With the creation of this civic partnership policy, the risk in precedent setting with other groups is low, as a process has been defined through that policy for future use. More or less, the town, as I mentioned before, has been following what is proposed in that policy for this opportunity and can adapt based on the discussion that took place tonight and any future discussion on that policy as well. The establishment of an agreement with the HDGA may come with an expectation of financial support. We're aware of that in the future and through budget, which would be considered by council. No discussion on any amounts has taken place between the HDGA and the town of Hinton, and no commitments made at this point. So that's outside of administration's role. There are current challenges that in that recreation corridor that must be addressed whether an agreement is reached or not with the Disc Golf Association, such as the aforementioned parking, signage, long-term land use planning, and the continuation of the recreation lease and financial contributions made by the town to support this lease, which comes in at about $800 a year. So tonight, the recommended action for this item is that committee recommend council approve the addition of disc golf to be included in the Parks and Recreation Service Area portfolio for 2020 and beyond, and that committee direct administration to bring a proposed partnership agreement for the operation of the disc golf course drafted in collaboration with the HDGA to a future standing committee meeting for further discussion and direction. Ms. Howarth and Mr. Von Clogren are here as well. They've been working on this opportunity, and we're pleased to accept any questions council may have.
Thank you, CAO. Council, we do have an action item before us. Is there any discussion, questions? Councillor McGowan.
I think I'm aware. I think though, if any citizens are watching, if this is the will of council to move this forward to regular council and it gets approved, really what this does is cements the relationship between the Hinton Disc Golf Society, Association and the town of Hinton, which I don't want to say is something that we've struggled to do, but I think it's something we're looking forward to doing. Or at least I know I am in moving forward, barring any concerns from the rest of council. Is that correct, CAO?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Council. That is correct. In formalizing that acknowledgement and creating an agreement, it makes decisions and support provided by administration a lot clearer. That we're working in the right direction with council's support.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGowan. Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the first recommended action in regards to adding or including it into our portfolio, does that tie us to any maintenance? I'm just trying to figure out what the staffing and budget implications of that kind of generic action are, or if those sorts of details would be hammered out through future decisions. Like, what are we, if council approves that, what are we agreeing to?
Madam Chair, I'll look to Ms. Howard to provide some clarity. I think some of the detail that council might be looking for would be present in the actual agreement, so that second motion. But if Ms. Howard has anything to add to that.
That pretty much captures it. For sure, the details would be included in the agreement. Those agreements can change over time, for sure. It could start out as something very simple, just saying, yes, the municipal government recognizes that disc golf is in the portfolio of recreation services that they're in the business of providing. And in this case, we would be providing it through a partnership with another group. Very similar, if not identical, to the mountain bike, the bike park that we have. They're depending on the extent that council wants to contribute to that partnership financially, would impact the budget for sure.
Thank you. Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I guess I want to first say I think this is, you know, a great reason why the first discussion of action item with the policy, because I would have loved to see this go through that process at the time instead of after the fact, you know, like get it up and going and then we come to council like other, you know, projects or other things that have, so that's why I'm looking forward to that policy. You know, because I don't think, without a doubt, I think that at the time, you know, we would have had that relationship to start off with, this an agreement already, and could have looked into the future of when it comes to the, you know, parking lot per se and things like that. So, you know, I think that it's inevitable that both the financial part of things and getting the municipality involved in this. I do appreciate the question about the what are we responsibilities afterwards. So that agreement, I'm looking forward to see how that looks, because as Ms. Howard mentioned, you know, we've got a lot of different organizations that we partner with that have similar, whether it's the mountain bike, whether it's the path, whether it's, you know, so I think we've got a lot to work with there. So, yeah, I think this is a good step forward for our community. We get a lot of people, you know, using it. It's hear good things about it, and it's again another partnership with a group outside of this organization. So, but I definitely will be looking forward to that agreement, what it looks like both financially, you know, and what kind of commitment we're making there. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor McGowan.
I'd like to make the motion that committee recommend council approve the addition of disc golf to be included in the Parks and Recreation Service Area portfolio for 2021 and beyond. And I don't want to move on to the second one. I'd rather keep those separate.
Thank you, Councillor McGowan. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, I just want to confirm. So if council approves this action, there will be no requirement regarding, and we're not going to have new liability things, staff requirements, finances, maintenance, like this action item wouldn't tie us to any of those things?
Thank you. So the agreement would hash a lot of that out. Some of it we have already because we are the holder of the lease. And so we have some inherent liability. If, for example, the association ceases to exist, we would be responsible for the infrastructure that's there now. So we would either remove it at a cost, maintain it at a cost, and manage the expectation that the community and the visitors have right now for that service level in our community. So there will be all of that in the agreement to some extent. So yes, by bringing it into the service area portfolio, that's what it means. The town recognizes that this is something they want to be in the business of doing, and that there will be some direct and indirect contribution that the town will make to that partnership. So that's the idea with a partnership agreement, is that both partners bring something to that relationship, and the town has some of that contribution already because of the lease agreement that we have and other things, and the benefits that we've also gained from being a destination for that, and another port area of recreation in our community, and all the opportunities that activity brings to the community. So those will all be recognized and appreciated and as contributions for both parties in the agreement.
Thank you, Ms. Howard.
Could I follow up, Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
I guess where I'm struggling is that if all of these things are going to be established through the agreement, and we already have a relationship with having the lease and all that, like I'm just struggling with the purpose of the first, the motion that's on the table right now, because it doesn't really, to me, doesn't accomplish anything. And again, it's potentially us saying, yes, it's part of our portfolio, which takes us closer to making budgetary decisions. Like, to me, we should be figuring out what the partnership agreement looks like and then establishing what role it plays within our portfolio. I could be completely missing something, but I'm really struggling with this first, with the motion that's on the table and how that works into where we are now and the next step, which would be the partnership agreement.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Cieo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So to explain, I suppose the way that I interpret these actions is that you can have one without the other. You could council could make a decision to include disc golf in the service area portfolio without having a partnership agreement. So without an annual contribution to, there's maintenance and whatnot, but the inclusion of it in our service area portfolio could allow for things like the continuation of the recreation lease and that support, as well as perhaps having disc golf on our permanent signage, where there's no agreement needed. So there's nothing further than we're acknowledging that disc golf exists in our community and it's part of our service area portfolio. So some of the other components of an agreement, such as an annual contribution, any kind of service expectations from the town or administrative or labor time, might not be required if we're just looking at including it in the service area portfolio. That's how I see the difference. I don't know if Howard wants to elaborate, if that answers your question, Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, I think I'm okay for now. I might request something prior to regular council. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Magoo?
Actually, I'll withdraw, Madam Chair. Thank you.
And Councillor Haas.
Thank you. I guess how I'm understanding it is right now disc golf is part of our community, but it doesn't fall under, it's kind of a off the side of our desk type of thing where this is John acknowledging as the town of Hinton, we want this part of our community officially, basically, right? And that there's the will of council to potential that be part of it. I definitely do see though the need for an agreement afterwards, as if we say now we're going to, it become part of our portfolio, but now what is that going to look like between the association and the town of Hinton in a way, which again, I think a lot of different examples, set precedents for some of those things and stuff like that. So I guess that's how I'm kind of seeing it, is it's an official, kind of handshake. Yes, we want you to be part of this, our portfolio. Now let's look at how that partnership's going to work together. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to strongly support this motion or this direction. Conceptually, if there is no agreement, we have to recognize that we have infrastructure in our community that we own the lease to, and it should be, to me, part of the Parks and Recreation Service. The first action item that we dealt with tonight is going to solve these issues from not arising in the future. But we have a park, we have a disc golf park that is on our land or on Crown land that we own the lease to, so we should acknowledge it. And I think it's extremely important to be there, because if the disc golf committee doesn't, folds or something happens, what do we do? So by not having it as part of our parks and recreation, it kind of stays in limbo. So to me, this is, I think, a crucial step. Then we work out and hope to have an agreement with disc golf in order for them to do their part and maintain it. But to me, this is, I look forward to having this officially in the town of Hinton portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And council, is there any further discussion, any further questions on this action item? So I will call the question. That committee recommend council approve the addition of disc golf to be included in the Parks and Recreation Service Area portfolio for 2021 and beyond. All those in favor? And that is carried. And Councillor Nelson.
I'd like to make a direction. This isn't one of the ones on the list here. So direct administration to include the town of Hinton's,
Please.
can't see it typing. Hinton's Parks and Recreation Service Area portfolio with the request for decision. And if we need more, it can be the request for decision for the proposed Parks and Recreation Service Area addition disc golf, if that's needed for clarification.
Okay, I'm just gonna pull it up to see that.
And if I could speak to it, if you need the rest of it, that's fine. I think where I'm struggling is I don't think I've ever seen a Parks and Recreation Service portfolio. So I think that's what I'm struggling with, is understanding what exists in there and what this is similar to. So although I'm very much in favor of some sort of relationship with the disc golf, I don't know what our portfolio looks like. So next week or whenever this comes to regular council, I'd love to see that portfolio to understand what we're adding it to. So thanks.
So, Councillor Nelson, would you like it to come back at regular council coming up? Do you need a date on that?
Well, if I could, I'd just submit the request for decision. So whenever administration is bringing back the request for decision on this agenda item, that's what it would come with. Just, whatever couple pages it is with the agenda package for this request for decision.
All right. So council, any discussion, any questions on this direction by Councillor Nelson? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think I can definitely support this, because if somebody asks me what the portfolio is, I don't know what it is either. I don't know what to say. My only question to administration is there a high level answer on or some clarity on what this looks like? Is this like a huge document? I would assume it's not our master plan for Parks and Rec. So just a little bit of a high level description would be helpful.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through to Council. Council will recall during budget process for 2020, dashboards were provided that gave the service area information, as well as some metrics and measurables for that area. In order to turn this around in a timely fashion and bring it forward using much the same information that's in this report and put it forward to next week's regular, administration can attach that dashboard if it's helpful. If additional analysis or explanation on each of those service areas is required through this motion, I would delay things, I think, further into October.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, if I could, I'm not expecting any breakdown of anything. It's just what is in the portfolio. So yeah, I don't need a whole lot. I just think it would help put this into perspective amongst the broader pictures. Thank you.
Council, we have a direction. Any more discussion? And seeing none. I will call the question that committee direct administration to bring a proposed partnership agreement. Oh, I'm sorry, the top one. Yes. Direct administration to include the Town of Hinton Parks and Recreation Service Area portfolio with the request for decision. All those in favor? And opposed? And carried. All right, our next action item is number 3, recreation parking.
Madam Chair,
I'm sorry?
we still have outstanding business with us. We still have outstanding business with us.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to put forward that committee direct administration to bring a proposed partnership agreement for the operation of the disc golf course drafted in collaboration with the Hinton Disc Golf Association to a future standing committee meeting for future discussion and direction. And if I may speak to it, I think we touched upon it a bit in the conversation earlier. I think this is obviously a step in the right direction. It's been a somewhat muddled past, but with all the conversation today, with all the action items, I think we're solving a problem that we've been, complicit to for the last 20, 30, 40 years. And it brings some much needed structure, but this partnership agreement solidifies, I think, a good ending. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Councillor McGowan.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I
Oh,
believe
sorry,
Councillor Nelson was next.
Nelson.
Yeah, this proposed partnership agreement, I'm assuming, or I guess I'm asking, will there be budget consideration within this agreement, like asks for contributions?
Through to Councillor Nelson. The conversation hasn't taken place yet, but I think it's safe to assume that there would be some expectation of financial contribution at this point. But again, it's so preliminary, and conversations haven't taken place yet with disc golf to understand what it is that would be included in the agreement.
Madam Chair, may I follow up?
Yes, sir.
I guess I would request a friendly amendment to take away the standing committee meeting part, maybe just a meeting. It's oftentimes our budget meetings are not standing committee meetings, they're special meetings. And if it has to come to a standing committee instead of a budget meeting, we're probably discussing a lot of this stuff. I think we're just better to have it a little bit more general so administration can bring it back as part of budget discussions if those aren't happening at standing committee meetings.
If I may, before I would accept the friendly amendment, I have a question for administration. The way I was reading it is, I kind of wanted this to come to standing committee because we're going to go through an agreement that is proposed by two parties, the administration with them. And I feel it shouldn't go to a budget meeting or any other type of meeting because within that agreement, we might dissect it, make different changes, work on not just the financial part, but other terms in language within it in order to have that partnership. So to me, it's not a budget conversation, or it can be, but it's only a small fraction. So I guess my question is to administration, is that a fair analysis or any input on whether it should be at a standing committee or not?
To Mayor Michaels, looking at timeframes for anticipated timelines for the agreement itself, it would be brought to council by late October at a standing committee at the earliest. So it would take a bit of time going back and forth with disc golf to reach some components of the agreement. I think. Sorry, I'm just trying to mull over what your question was. So to bring this forward strictly through budget as opposed to bringing it as its own item through standing committee, I think given that it's one of our first through the civic agency policy framework, as we've been using to kind of guide ourselves through this up to this point, it may be beneficial for council to take some time to look at the agreement and understand the components and how it might apply to other agencies that come forward. I believe though that, given that budget will be commencing shortly and we'll be working on that kind of simultaneously, if there is an understanding of, I guess a ballpark for financial contribution, as soon as administration has an idea of what that is, it could be included in some budget discussions. We don't wish to delay this and get the agreement in front of council to take a look at as soon as possible. And it could take less time than what we're anticipating, but I'm not sure that answers your question. I think we need to get a little bit further into this before we can determine whether it could come on its own rather than coming to as a agenda item through budget. I don't know if that helps.
So, Madam Chair, while remaining friendly, I'd like to keep the motion the way it's worded today, or at least because I think, again, standing committee meeting, there are other elements outside of the budget that I think makes it necessary to not tie to any budget meeting is my preference. But I'll listen to the rest of council and perhaps rethink that after. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor McGowan.
Yeah, and I guess in this case, I would ask the mayor to consider, this is my thinking on it, is if it just generally says meeting, one of the things that does give us the option to do is say at a budget meeting. I agree with you, a budget meeting should be a budget meeting. But in this case, what we could do alongside that same meeting is call a special meeting of council. As an example, that gives us that flexibility where at a budget or prior to having a budget meeting or after, we could also call a special meeting where the sole thing discussed is, a meeting with the membership of the HDGA where we discuss the nature of an agreement. It's still happening on the same day as a budget meeting because the topics do cross. But for transparency's sake, by simply saying meeting, it could be a special meeting of council. And then, we're being transparent. We're dealing with the business we should be dealing with in each meeting. But it gives us the flexibility of doing what we need to do on a given day. And it only needs 24 hours notice. So I guess that would be my consideration.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Did you want to respond? Okay. Could I just go directly to Ms. Fox? And Ms. Fox.
Thank you, Chair, through to council. If council was willing to just put meeting and leave it up to administration as to where it would best be suited, I typically don't recommend any one-offs coming with a budget presentation. I would rather have those one-off kind of conversations happen as separate meeting agenda items. So I just think if you left it at meeting and left it up to us as to what type of meeting, we could make that and bring it back for you. I think obviously administration wants this to be before we get too heavy into budget discussions. So having that come that way is just my suggestion.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Yes, sir.
Seeing that, I guess procedurally, can I just change my motion to strike standing committee? I know the friendly amendment is no longer there, so. And I'll just speak to it quickly. There's obviously an appetite to have that flexibility. To me, I still, if it comes out of standing committee, that's my preference. But if not, it's a flexibility, and there's obviously more than one councillor who wants that flexibility, and I'm fine to respect that.
So we're fine with Mr. Mayor just striking that one word, eh?
2 words.
2 words. Okay. All right, council.
So I think I'm in the queue.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Yes.
I guess I have process questions in that I feel like the discussion up to this point, especially the first agenda item, was to have a look at all of these partnership agreements with our partnership policy, with the scope of the overall budget when we're making these partnership decisions. But it seems like this, we're going to be asked to make a decision without knowing the overall budget scope. Like I'm missing something here potentially, or maybe it's something where the direction out of that is to not commit to any finances, or like I'm just trying to figure out what the next, 2 or 3 meetings to determine the future of us and the Disc Golf Association look like.
Thank you, sir. And Councillor Magoon.
I would echo some of those concerns. I think this is an awkward time of year. We're moving into budget. We're potentially looking at adding a portfolio, an added service portfolio to what the town of Hinton offers officially. And we know that there will be budget implications potentially now, this year, and of course in the future. We have another agenda item that also deals with budgetary impacts. So I think it's awkward, if it's the will of council to move forward with this. I think this is one of these moving targets it's imperfect. We're going to have to try and deal with it. And that's why I think dealing with it sooner rather than later is the best, which is why I supported your request for adding a little bit of versatility to that meeting, because then we don't have to wait for the specific standing committees. If it's something we want to deal with sooner through a special meeting, we have that flexibility. And I think that's good moving through the budget cycles. So.
Councillor House.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess my thinking of this, and I can look to administration too, but I mean, we don't even know what the disc golf really wants to begin with, and having that discussion. Two, it doesn't have to start this. I mean, there's no start date on this. I mean, we could go potentially to the disc golf and say, look, we want you part of the portfolio. Budgetary wise, though, we're looking at 2020. We're looking into the previous year. Maybe we might do the fees for you this way. You've been doing a bang up job with everything that you've been doing up to this point. We're going to look after the fees. We're going to look after the lease. We're going to do that. And the rest of it's going to fall on you until the next budget year when we can narrow it down a little bit further. So there's nothing stopping us from having an agreement such as that. I think personally, I haven't talked to the disc golf, but I think they're just looking for that partnership, that look forward into the future. Because if they're looking at it now, they might look, I don't know if we're going to be able to keep this thing going. We all know that, volunteer burnout and things like that, but if they see that the town has an appetite to continue this, that might also give. So I think there's flexibility in that as well. That there's no date on, what the financial part of things. Because up to this point, that's what we've been doing, correct? There has been a small contribution of financial, but we don't know what else they want until we have a conversation. So that's, I guess, how I'm seeing it. So thank you.
You're welcome, sir. So I just want to recap here. The mayor did make a motion. Councillor Nelson made a friendly amendment to it. Our mayor did not initially accept it. He has now taken 2 words out of his initial motion. What I'm hearing people say is there appears that people would like to have this meeting. So is there further discussion here? Yes, sir.
I think just to speak to one other piece, and Councillor Hawes sort of hinted at it, I think that any agreement that we do move forward with those initial discussions, they have to be realistic. And I know certainly it's understanding the ongoing costs, and a number of councillors have talked about that. Certainly administration has talked about that in the past, understanding the fiscal realities of taking on civic partnerships with different agencies and support organizations in our community. And the other thing that I think is also important, we don't hope for it, but it's that what do we do if, this is no longer something that we can sustainably or viably operate? Maybe we do have the volunteer burnout or the fan base declines where it's no longer something we can support. What does that scale back look like? Or is it something that we take over, et cetera, et cetera? I think that's a responsible way of looking at that agreement, is understanding that we're looking at it from all sides for the benefit of the community financially. So again, I just think that's going to be part of a good conversation moving forward.
And CAO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the conversation around this tonight. Administration will endeavor to provide as much information as early as possible in order to help it. As Councilor McGowan stated, this is the timing isn't great, but the opportunities in front of us, the items in front of us, and we'll do our best to navigate this through budget and ensure that Council has as much information as they require to make an informed decision at either point in the process. We won't look to isolate them from each other, I suppose. So without having the initial conversation with disc golf, there is no idea of how long this might take to discuss. However, updates to council as we go to let you know what we're looking at will be provided.
Thank you, Ms. CAO. Okay. So, Wendy, could I see that? Yes, thank you. So, council, we do have a direction. Is there any further question or discussion on this before I call to question? And seeing nothing, that council direct administration to bring a proposed partnership agreement for the operation of the disc golf course drafted in collaboration with the Hinton Disc Golf Association to a future meeting for future discussion and direction. All those in favor? And yes, thank you. And our next action item is number 3. It's recreation parking capacity expansion at Rock Road, and CAO will be presenting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the 2020 budget process, a request for parking expansion at Rob Road to support disc golf, mountain biking, and trail access was made and considered by council. Though ultimately not receiving funding in this year's budget, administration worked with the HDGA and HIMBA to discuss the need and opportunity to utilize funds identified for use for a parking lot expansion by Trans Mountain Corporation through a community funding agreement. Both the HDGA and HIMBA have determined a need for more parking capacity as the use of the area has increased, posing safety concerns. Through constructive dialogue between the parties, as well as considerable legwork provided by the HDGA and HIMBA to bring the project to this point, the project is at a stage where the town can contribute with detailed design and support and the creation of a tender-ready plan. The funding from Trans Mountain is essential to the viability of the project. However, through that detailed design phase, the estimated costs may come in higher than expected, at which time additional budget amounts may be required. Additional funds may be determined through the capital budget process this fall, and as well, grant opportunities reviewed by administration and project partners. At this time, the recommended action for this item is that committee recommends council approve an allocation of $100,000 from the town of Hinton Trans Mountain Pipeline Memorandum of Understanding to be utilized by the town to design and construct additional recreation parking at Rock Road. Ms. Howard and Mr. Von Claveren are here as well to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. CAO. We do have an action item before us, and I do have my name down first, and I'll put Mr. down. So on page 24 of 44, here's a concern I have. It's an implication of decision. So if we say yes to this and we allot $100,000 of this money we allot $100,000, and then we find out that this is going to cost us way more than $100,000. This money has already been allocated to the disc golf. What if another area needs this money? How hard is it going to be for us to, take money? Because here it says it will be difficult to renegotiate the allocation of these funds to alternate projects without negatively impacting the community's expectations and funding source. So I'm afraid that we will make a decision without having all the information we need. So could you or someone speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll start off and I'll look to Ms. Howard and Mr. Von Claveren for some support. So the memorandum of understanding was developed a number of years ago, and at that time as well, additional parking for the Rob Road recreation area was considered and included in that MOU. along the way, there's been no indication from the community or from council or from Trans Mountain to change what that money has been earmarked for. In order to move ahead with the design and exploring this parking considerations in this project further, design money would be needed from that 100,000 in order to move forward, to begin. So there is, I guess, a risk that the project design and understanding will change, and the scope of the project may change, at which time we would come back to council for some direction, either through the capital budget process. There's also the opportunity for administration and project partners to look for grant opportunities in order to support what's left, what else we may need. I don't know if that goes a little bit of a ways to answering your question. Ms. Howard or Mr. Blanc-Favre, if you have anything to add, I welcome your help.
I may just add one thing. Administration believes that at the end of the day, the parking concerns on Robb Road are ours to solve. While we have a current partnership with the Mountain Bike Association, and we may have a future partnership with the Disc Golf Association, the fact that those partnerships exist and that we endorse the activities that go on in that corridor make the parking challenge, which is a good problem to have. It means that it's well used and it's a great place. At the end of the day, ours. And so the bit of a nuance, and I point that out in the report because it's less about disc golf asking for their own parking lot, mountain bike asking for a bigger parking lot or a different parking lot. This is about that collaborative solution that we all sort of own a piece in. And I believe the town owns the biggest solution. And so this money, if not allocated toward solving that problem, either in part or in its entirety, if it's going to cost more, we may be able to allocate some of our infrastructure money there. Again, overall budget where all of our funding comes from. And yes, the groups can access some nonprofit application forms for grant funding that we don't have access to. So it's a small budget. Perhaps Mr. Vanna or Mr. Hawk could chime in as well, but we'll do our best to solve the problem the best that we can with this money. I do have a meeting scheduled for this Friday to speak with the Trans Mountain reps that are providing this funding. We've heard indirectly that they're hoping to allocate it in November. I'm hoping to confirm that this Friday for this and the other project, which is trail enhancement. And I know the agreement is attached to this report for your reference.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. And Councillor McGowan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess that's where we hope that they write a really big check, like just one of those big cardboard ones. I guess my question for administration is more a procedural communication piece. Assuming that the will of council is that, of course, we move forward in pursuing this. Just some low-hanging fruit. Something that I've really learned the importance of in the last year and a half as a councillor is it's not even the end decision, it's the procedure of bringing community groups who have an emotional investment in a project along for the ride in terms of communication. And I guess my question to administration is, because I imagine from an administration perspective, if council is to say, yes, we allocate this money towards, improving the site in terms of parking, please go forward and make that happen. Have we begun discussions as administration in what our communications plan is for bringing the invested groups along for the ride and making sure that we're communicating with what's happening there clearly and effectively so that they're not caught off by surprise. They understand what the procedure is. They have an opportunity to engage in sharing their opinions and their expertise in what's going down. And in no way should that trump safety or engineering standards. But again, I just think it's part of good community engagement to sort of have that ongoing communication on the process. Have we discussed that?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through to Councillor McGowan. So administration has met with the stakeholders, I guess, or the partner groups in this project. And it would be my understanding that they would continue to do so. That, some of the legwork has been done with those groups to begin with. So I think the intention is to work collaboratively moving forward, so that proactive communication that you speak of, the connections already been made with the groups, and just continuing that for the project. And yeah, I concur with your thoughts there, and I believe Ms. Howard is shaking her head, nodding her head, not shaking her head, and I believe future meetings are already planned. Should this move forward. So.
Awesome. I just want to express my appreciation on that. Again, it's little things that I learned moving, over the last couple of years. It's proactive approaches as opposed to sort of band-aids after the fact and trying to, oh no, we wanted to have the chat with you, whatever the case. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McGowan. Councillor Nelson.
I'd like to make the direction that committee recommends council approve an allocation of $100,000 from the town of Hinton Trans Mountain Pipeline Memorandum of Understanding to be utilized by the town to design and construct additional recreational parking at Robb Road. And if I can speak to it, this is awesome. It solves safety issues. It creates tourism opportunities. I still heard so many cool visions and ideas for our old landfill site that's now been fully remediated, and this actually provides better access to that, and could help some of those visions that have been talked about for years come through. So this checks off every box that I have, and I think it's just important to recognize the continuing and past impact that the resource industry and business as a whole has played to improve the lives of our communities. So it's a time where I think it's really important to recognize those impacts. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor McGowan.
Yeah, it's an awesome problem to have, right? As Ms. Howard said, it's great. It kind of blows my mind to think that I'm playing disc golf where, when I was a kid, there was a garbage dump. I still remember when it was a garbage dump, and now we're playing disc golf there. That's pretty awesome. That's a good problem to have. And the fact that, it's creating a bit of a safety issue, and that there's so many people that want to be up there. Here's our chance to get in there as a council and say, no, look, we recognize there's a problem. There's an opportunity to partner with, outside agencies, both private and citizen-led, to make our community not only better, but safer. I think that's just a win all around. I'm very excited. Thank you.
Well, I just quickly have to chime in here. I feel if there's an area that we can take a walk in and actually look at, that would help us better make our decisions, we should do that. And I and another councillor did take that walk to the disc golf. And I'll tell you, to talk to the volunteers, the commitment to, I couldn't walk all those 18 holes. It would be quite a feat, but yeah, I will certainly support this. Thank you. So, council, we do have a direction on the floor. Is there any other discussion, any questions? And seeing none, I will call the question that committee recommends council approve an allocation of $100,000 from the town of Hinton Trans Mountain Pipeline Memorandum of Understanding to be utilized by the town to design and construct additional recreational parking at Robb Road. All those in favor? And it is carried. Thank you.
It's not the kids that party at the landfill. I have some park.
And our fourth action item is preliminary budget discussion report, and that will be presented by our CAO, Ms. Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The purpose of the report that's before council tonight is to outline the budget schedule, identify challenges and opportunities for budget 2021, and confirm administration will be bringing forward a budget that has no greater than 4% increase for council's first look at budget for 2021. The information shared is to prepare for the budget work and deliberations that are upcoming, and to provide council an opportunity to ask questions or provide additional directions through that budget schedule. The information through 2020, a number of impacts to the budget preparation have been identified for 2021, including additional unknown impacts of COVID-19, which administration has been offsetting throughout 2020. However, uncollectible utility payment and taxes have yet to be identified, and the possibility of a second wave of the pandemic will need consideration as well. In addition, the unknown impacts of any changes in linear tax assessment with the county may have an impact to our budget and will require separate conversation through the budget process, budget deliberations, should our revenue sharing agreement with the county be impacted. As well, Council, we're looking for intentions for public engagement through the budget process. Timelines are tight and the ability to meet in person may be challenging. However, online engagement opportunities are possible through some direction from Council tonight. In the budget schedule, an item for a town hall is included for September, October, and that was based on what took place last year ahead of budget and could be achieved through some online means with an extended visit of Council similar to what we did in person at the Guild last year. At this point, administration is happy to receive any questions or comments at this time. And Ms. Fox is here to provide additional information or explanation.
Thank you, Ms. Cielo. Council, we do have an action item before us. Is there any discussion, questions? And Ms. Fox.
Thank you, Chair, through to Council. So I just want to say thank you to Ms. Olson. She usually, and she does do a very thoughtful process to introduce the report and represent everyone. And I would say that this preliminary report that's brought forward has really been an aligned effort with our senior leadership team to try and bring you all of the information we can up front. We've had a couple, during my time, a couple go-arounds with preliminary budget discussions. I'm trying to stick to the annual reporting and budget schedule timeline. Some of the things that I want Council to take into consideration is the importance of the strategic plan and the strategic plan update that helps give administration priority of what we need to focus on based on Council's direction when we go into budget planning. And the ability for the town hall meeting to give Council feedback as to what kind of direction they'd like to set. So those things really do tie together, and the more that we go on with Council through their term, the importance of having those things tied together, and you guys see the outcome of your strategic plan reflected in the budget. And when we have to go into a difficult budgeting year like this one, ensuring that your priorities are really clear. So I would be looking for, if there is very specific direction that Council has, looking at this preliminary budget, we don't know that unless you tell us. So if there's something very specific that you want us to do, you have to let us know, but we don't know that ahead of time. So we try to give you all the information up front of what we're looking at as we go down this path. And we've tried to capture that as best we can. And a lot of that information has been discussions we've had with Council over the last year. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. And Councillor McGowan.
I can only speak for myself at this point in time, especially at, just beginning to discuss budget. I'll start with the public engagement piece for administration. My assumption is with the challenges related to COVID, and as it comes to town halls, that we're likely looking at a form of virtual town hall, as you had indicated. Has any thought been given to sort of what format? You know what, I'm going to step back from that. I guess for myself, there needs to be some form of public engagement piece. I certainly understand if it's got to be virtual, given the complexities given to COVID. And I'm looking forward to hearing any ideas that administration has to facilitate that. And then just moving on, Madam Chair, from an expectations perspective, I think when Council moved forward with the last budget identifying that, that 4% tax rate increase, that gives me a really good starting point as a councillor from a place to work from. And I'm just looking forward to seeing what the budget looks like as it relates to that starting point. And then we can hammer out the specific details as we move through the budgetary process. I've always found that the closer we can get to what's comfortable for us as a starting point, it's a lot easier to get to where we need to be. So thank you.
And Ms. Fox?
Thank you, Chair, through to Council. Just to touch on Councillor Magoon's comment about the starting point. So knowing that in the first 2020 budget, we approved and we had a 3-year plan. Of course, that plan had about an 8% increase required for 2021. Knowing that Council's direction was for the 4%, a good way to look at the starting point as far as a financial perspective, if we were to deliver the services that we have now and not change anything, right off the bat, we start with $490,000 short because we now no longer have the reserve that was being brought in. So we are short $490,000 to offer the current service levels. As captured in here under the challenges, we have the union wage increase that adds to that number, and then some inflationary considerations on that. And now we have kind of a new normal of business with COVID. So costs for doing business now have increased in regards to personal protective equipment required by staff, those sorts of things. So when you think about a starting point for us right now, think about those financial considerations that need to be taken into account right at the start. So that's without adding or changing any of our services, and that's without doing any sort of reductions or removing anything at this point. So we're already looking at those kind of financial considerations, and then doing the next piece of that hard work of bringing all that in alignment with the 4% increase, knowing that we were already quite high, having some of those negative impacts on us right then.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Do you have your hand up, sir?
No, ma'am.
Could you put it up? Oh, sorry.
Well,
Yes, sir.
well, I guess then just to speak to those considerations, you know, I really think that, not to be too vague, but that strikes at the heart of the budgeting process for us as councillors, right? I mean, this is where we have to go to administration and say, okay, look, where's the realities? But also, you know, what do our service levels look like potentially if this is our goal? Where are potential savings and efficiencies? You know, and we have to dig deep, and we have to be realistic in understanding that this can affect everything from personnel to service levels. And that's part of the budgetary discussions. And I'm open to having those conversations. We have to be willing to be mobile and be agile given the economic realities that not only the town is facing, but our citizens are facing. And I think, you know, I'm looking forward to that this year. I'm looking forward to having those conversations and to say, where can we build efficiencies and where can we look for savings if we really do want to bring in a lower tax increase in order to keep doing what we do.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Fox.
Thank you, Chair, through to Council. Also, the other item that I wanted to mention, and it's something that we've been skirting around, but I think something that needs to be reminded that we have to take into consideration again this year is our water utility revenues. So looking at doing a cost analysis, and we're working on that in the background, but the actual subsidization of general taxation by the profit we're making in water has to be addressed. And each year we've kind of brought forward a plan to start reducing our reliance on the water revenue because it is contradictory to the MGA. But when we end up at the end trying to cut to meet that percentage, we seem to go after the reserves that we're trying to fix that issue. So that is something else that will have to come to the table and be looked at seriously.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Councillor Magoon.
And I guess just if I could ask administration, that is actually a section of the MGA that I know I could do with more research and education on. And I'm wondering if and I certainly understand if it's not now, because I don't have the MGA memorized per section, but if we could get a reference on what the specific section is from a legislative standpoint, I'd like to read that over, just because that was, in all my history as a councillor, that's not a section that I've ever had to deal with. So if I could get a reference on that, just so I could do some reading, that would be fantastic.
Ms. Fox.
Thank you, Chair, through to Council. I will send that out so you guys have that, and it is in regards to cost recovery.
So Council, we do have an action item here. I'm looking for some direction. And on page 36 of 44, admin has given us some options and we can come up with our own. Councillor Nelson.
I'd like to move that committee accept the preliminary budget discussion report as information, I guess, and that committee accept the annual reporting and budget schedule as presented. The only thing I don't, it doesn't bother me at all, but our schedule, this meeting is shown as August 25th. Obviously, it's not going to meet August 25th, but I think that's pretty trivial in the scheme of things. And the overall layout is, you know, maybe we'll hit actually approving 2021's budget before 2021 gets here. It'd be awesome if we could accomplish that. And, you know, I think last year will help us really focus on the task at hand this year and hopefully be a process that gets us there. So I look forward to passing it by December 31st, not on December 31st. Though. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So we do have a direction on the floor. Is there any other discussion, questions? And I will call the question that committee accept the preliminary budget discussion report as information and that the committee accept the annual reporting and budget schedule presented. All those in favor? And that is carried, Wendy. Thank you. Oh, Ms. Fox.
Thank you, Chair, through to Council. What I would like to get a little bit of discussion or understanding on, and maybe this occurred and you guys agreed and I didn't catch that, but as far as your public engagement, am I to understand that you all as council, mayor and council, want some form of public engagement in the form of online town hall and happen prior to budget discussions? I just want to make sure that, because I know Councillor Magoon was very vocal on it, but nobody else actually had any feedback on that. And I wasn't really looking at heads nodding, so I'm just looking for consensus if that is what you guys are looking for, and if you want administration, the communications, strategic communications department to put something together that would be amenable to council. That might be a little bit more structured than last year, but maybe similar in an online forum. Is that fair to say, Ms. Olson?
I'm sorry?
She nodded.
Oh, okay. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'd like to maybe consider some other options regarding public engagement rather than just jump into a virtual town hall. I think the percentage of our citizens who are willing and able to participate in a digital town hall might be fairly limited, just gauging by the response from other digital avenues that we've provided. I'm not sure that would be the best way to collect information from a broad base of our citizens. So I'm not sure how to move that forward, but I'm not sure I'd fully support just a virtual town hall without considering some other options at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with Councillor Ostashik. I don't think limiting it to a virtual town hall is good. I understand that we're potentially limited in face-to-face contacts and real person contacts, but whatever we could do, person to person, is always more preferable for myself as well. I understand if we are limited by COVID. So if administration does have ways to engage with people, because again, Councilor Stashik's right. I think if we stick just to virtual, we're potentially eliminating demographics. And I would hate to do that. So thanks.
Thank you, sir. I'm gonna put me down right now. So, Ms. Fox, would it be fair to ask you to bring options to us in regards to how to, do the different options available to us for engaging our citizens?
Thank you, Chair, through to Council. First of all, I'm gonna actually defer to Ms. Olson, knowing though that she's not in the communications, but she may want to give her input. Last year, communications actually brought something back to Council to say, these are the things that we could do. Given the timeline, is that something that we would look to do again? Sorry for putting you on the spot there.
That's all right. This is something that I'm sure the communications and strategic area of our organization have ideas already. Actually, Mr. Jaworski was texting me a couple of ideas. So I think it is something that we could put a little bit of thought to and bring to Council. We understand timelines are short. It might be, after next week's meeting, we're not meeting again until the beginning of October. So looking to maximize the time that we have, we'll put something together that would achieve what Council is seeking. So I think what we were looking for tonight was just an indication that Council does want to do public engagement for the budget. We can put together some ideas that maybe cover a couple of different methods in order to engage on the budget prior to budget deliberations to give Council an idea of how the community's feeling. I would have to take a look at the report that was brought forward last time around. I know that there was a defined appetite to do a town hall meeting. It is more difficult, I suppose, to do online, even through Zoom, but there are different online platforms for public engagement that have been emerging and are used by other communities, such as Bang the Table and things like that. So we can do a little bit of looking. There may be a cost associated with some of these items that would be identified for Council as well. So we'll look to bring something back that gives Council an idea of what we can do with the limitations we have this year.
Thank you, CEO. Do you need a direction from Council, or is this conversation?
I think the conversation is good. We were looking to understand whether Council wanted to do public engagement or not. We're getting the impression from Council that there is an appetite to do engagement around budget. We can bring back some options, and then Council can have a more robust conversation once they have kind of a jumping off point, I suppose.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy that something will be coming to Council for us to discuss, but I do want to share, I guess, my desire, and I don't see anything that limits us from doing what we used to do, having a location where people can come face to face, because of the schools are open. We're 6 months into this, and unless there's an influx of people eager to come to us regarding the budget, we only get about a dozen people a year. If you look back at I can look back at the last 6 years. So that's not a big issue. So for me, one of the options I hope would be some form of in-person interaction with our residents. That would be my expectation. So I don't know if there's any objections to that, but I hope that's something that's on. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Hollis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I concur. I mean, I'm all for public engagement in any shape, form that we can make that work. But I agree with Mayor Michaels that we have many plans in place, for schools, recreation centers, things like that, to be opening up where people will be coming together. So I'm certain that we have enough plans out there that we can transfer that over to a face-to-face of some sort. and, even if it is, we limit it to a certain number and we get more people wanting to be there, then we have another night, or something like that. So I think there definitely, that there is some options there. So, but to your question, if you're looking for it, my head is a nod for public engagement as well, so.
Thanks, sir. And Councilor Nelson.
Yeah, I think looking at what we did last year, that stage is pretty big. We could spread out pretty good. And if it's a limit of 20 to 30 people in the stands, making sure that we can achieve that and do a bit of a hybrid where it's potentially live stream and you can also take questions via Zoom or via some sort of mechanism to bring people in. So if there's people who are unable or not comfortable coming physically to the venue, they still have an opportunity to engage with us. And also that would allow people who, because of limitations of the number of people we could have, would still have another way to engage with council. So as long as it can be achieved, I think what we did last year was actually a really good foundation for future. Previously, we always did have 6 to 8 people. Last year, we had actually a really good turnout, and it was lively and it was challenging and it was fun. And I thought it was one of the best public things we've done. So thank you.
Was that the one with the guild? So, council, I'd like to move on to additional information before we take our first break. And Ms. Fox?
Thank you. Just before we move on, I just want to add, to wrap everything up, that the strategic planning update session is going to be very important if you want to provide direction in regards to service areas, desired service changes, priority setting, to give us direction. Just to be able to tie specifically the strategic session to what happens in budget and the ability for council to set direction, that piece is very important. And I'm sure that you'll be led that way. Having that priority understanding helps us with priority budgeting. And I'm sure you can understand from this report that we're already in a position that we have to look at, again, at service area reductions in order to achieve the desired tax rate that council wants. And because that's the case, it's going to be very important for us to understand if council has priority areas. So I just want to make that very clear. Also, things like that are identified in the opportunities section, things like tax rate splits, that's going to require some work. And if that is something that council wants to look at, we did provide some information to give you an idea what it means. But if that's something you actually want administration to dive into or look at, bringing you back a report, that's not something that I would want to try and introduce and do right during budget deliberation. That would be something that I would want to bring information to, so council could have a wholesome conversation on just that topic. So if there are things like that that council wants to address, at some point getting some direction on that would be very helpful. So at that, I'll leave it at that, and thank you for the conversation.
So when you say you'd like some information, would that be emails from councilors, however?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, through to council. Probably information would be when you're doing your strategic planning session and update. If there are certain things that you want council to focus on, you will have those discussions then. And outside of that, action items will come with your strategic planning. Your strategic plan, when you first said it, came with a whole bunch of objectives, and those objectives were turned over to administration to decide how to fit those in and deliver those. That would be the same thing, just very specific. Knowing that there's 1 year left in this term, there might be specific items that council would like prioritized, and it'll come through that session. The direction will come through that session, or it'll come at a time where we're doing departmental presentations on different service areas to council.
Thank you. So, councilor, is there any more discussion on action item number 4, preliminary budget discussion report, or can we move on? We're good? All right. So, under additional information, urgent matters from council, and I will start with Councillor Stashik.
Yeah, nothing, Madam Chair.
Mr. Mayor,
Nothing, Madam Chair.
Councillor Haas,
Nothing for me, Madam Chair.
Councillor Nelson,
Agree, Madam Chair?
Councillor McGowan.
Madam Chair and Council, I'd just like to take a second to express my appreciation to everybody for their patience over the last 3 weeks while we were dealing with my wife's surgery and sort of how that impacted our schedule and certainly my attendance at the last 2 meetings. Thanks. In short, thank you. It's appreciated not only by myself but my family as well. So thanks.
You're very welcome, sir. And Councillor Wah.
Nothing for me, Madam Chair.
Okay, sir. Okay, I do have one thing. Today, and I don't often go online, but today I went online and I was reading that landlords are now starting to evict people because they're not paying their rent. And has admin had any of these people call in saying I'm getting kicked out because I can't pay my rent?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, I can't speak for all of administration. Nothing's been raised to my level for comment or feedback.
Thank you. And that's all I have. And CAO, do you have anything to report?
Nothing to report. I'm just happy to welcome Councillor McGowan back to the table. You were missed, and we're happy that we got you back. And
Thank you. And Ms. Anderson?
I have nothing.
And who would this person be?
Legislative.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Wade. Sorry?
Ms. Anderson is.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. I got the two mixed up. So neither one of you.
I have no update for Ledge.
All right. So before we go in camera, I'd like to call a little 7-minute break, please. Yes, sir.
I'll make a motion to go on camera with a 7-minute break.
All those in favor?